privately in the principal's office, Duke leaning against one wall, chewing on a kitchen match, while Virgil sat across from McCall, their knees nearly touching. She was a tall, vague woman, thin, small-boned, her brown hair worn long. She had a sprinkling of small, dark moles on her right cheek. "Nothing has ever worked right for him," she said, her hands flopping restlessly in her lap. I don't know, he was never assertive. He's not stupid, not at all, but if somebody told him to jump off a roof, he'd do it. If you didn't tell him what to do, he wouldn't do anything. I don't know how that happened. His father went away. So, what was his relationship with Jimmy Sharp? Virgil asked. I don't know Jimmy very well. I know Becky better, McCall said. They both went to high school here, but I'm in the elementary school. They hung out together. Jimmy and Becky are, not very bright. Becky was attractive, blonde with a figure. How she got out of school without getting pregnant, I don't know. The boys would cluster around her. I'm sure she was giving it up. Most people thought she'd be homecoming queen in her senior year, but all the girls voted against her. Everybody knew it, but she never quite understood what happened. She said Tom had been discharged from the Navy because he suffered from psoriasis, which had also kept him off sports teams in school. We'd tell everybody that it's not contagious, but, who wants to take a chance? After the Navy, he'd worked in Bigham, stocking a grocery store, and then had gone off to the Twin Cities, where he'd gotten a job as a security guard. I knew that he'd seen Becky, she said. He's always been interested in her. He mentioned her, but he never mentioned Jim. I don't know if they're hanging out. As far as she knew, he was still working as a security guard. She hadn't heard from him in months and didn't know how to get in touch. When he'd run her out, Virgil walked over to the high school, where he talked with the assistant principal in charge of discipline, whose name was Robert Fred. All three had had some disciplinary problems. Jimmy Sharp had been close to expulsion a couple of times, suspected of providing marijuana to other students, but there'd been no proof. He'd also been in a few fights, but had been smart enough to keep them off school grounds. Becky Welsh had a tendency to skip school. McCall hadn't skipped, but he could go weeks without doing mandatory homework. They were just pains in the behind, Fred said, shaking his head. I never suspected they'd get involved with anything like this. Never saw this coming. Though Jimmy was a mean kid. When Virgil went back to his who'd do it for money, Robert said. Virgil added, not a complete dumbass who'd get caught and roll over on you. Roberts uncrossed his boots and snapped the cigarillo butt down the road. That's a tough one. Who do you think did the hiring? Virgil said. What do you do for a living? I buy and sell, Robert said. Offense? That'd be a goddamn uncharitable way to look at it, Robert said. Okay, well, this is the way it is, Virgil said. I'll tell you who I'm looking at. But if the word gets around town and it goes back to you, I'll bust you, and I'll fix it so Davenport can't save your ass. Roberts tipped his head and said, I can keep quiet. Virgil. I've been told that Jimmy Sharp was hired to kill Ag O'Leary Murphy by Dick Murphy. Murphy stands to inherit $750,000. Roberts whistled and said distractedly, No wonder. No wonder what? I saw Dick shooting 9-ball down to Roseanne's billiards last night, and he seemed pretty goddamn cheerful for somebody whose old lady just got killed. That right. Pretty goddamn cheerful, Robert said. This is not owned by Roseanne Bush, is it? Virgil asked. Yeah, she owns pretty much every low-life place in town, Robert said. You know her? No, but I heard about her, and a lot of bad people hook up around her. She might find a killer for you, Robert said. His eyes narrowed in thought, and he asked, If you think Dick hired Jimmy Sharp, why are you looking for another killer? Because Sharp's kind of a dumbass, I'm told, and I'm not sure he'd be the first person you go to if you were looking for somebody to do a good job on it. Robert said, Huh, you're smarter than you look. Thanks. You know, if Dick was gonna sneak up on somebody and ask that question, would you do a killing for me? I bet the first person he'd ask would be Randy White. They played football together and they hang out some. Randy was a linebacker and a mean little jerk. He'd try to hurt people. Everybody knew it, but the coach is just as mean as he was. Fucking rattlesnake. There was rumors he'd slip Randy $10 for every starter he'd take out of a game. I'm not sure I believe that. It's just too goddamn wrong. And White is still around town? Oh yeah, he works for the county road department, Robert said. Digging holes, filling them in, runs a snowplow in the winter. He runs with a crowd that's too fast for him. Out to the Indian casinos and such. Needs money all the time. You ever done any business with him? Robert showed a thin smile. Maybe. County's always got some surplus equipment, and to go to the O'Leary's place and have a long talk with them about Dick Murphy. Instead, he went to the Pumpkin Cafe, got a BLT and fries and a Diet Coke, and read the local newspaper, and waited. He was on his third Diet Coke when Davenport called back. I've got 2 names and phone numbers for you. You'll have to meet them somewhere private because they don't want to be seen with you. Not a problem. Are they on their phones right now? They are, waiting for you to call, Davenport said. Don't give them too much shit, and call me and tell me where you're going to meet in case something goes wrong. Are they going to be a problem? Shouldn't be, but I don't know some of them as well as I should. Can they keep their mouths shut? Virgil asked. If you use the right threats. The first guy was named Honor Roberts, and he said he'd meet Virgil at the Parker Bird Sanctuary where Bear County Road 6 crossed the Minnesota River. There's a chain across the entrance, but if you look close, you'll see that the lock is broken. You can lift it right off and come in. Be sure you put it back up when you come through. The second source was a woman named Roseanne Bush, who'd meet him in the town's only tattoo parlor, which was called The Bush. Were you going to be okay there? Virgil asked. Yeah, we're not open till 6. You can park in the back of the Goodwill store and walk down the alley. The door will be unlocked. Just come on through. The bird sanctuary was 10 miles northwest of town, a piece of damp land with a lot of bare branch cottonwoods in the loop of an oxbow of the Minnesota River. There was nobody else on the road when Virgil lifted the chain off the steel post, went through, and replaced the chain. A gravel road wandered back into the woods, and Virgil, though an outdoorsman, had to wonder what kind of birds were being preserved. Crows, blackbirds, starlings. He didn't know of any rare species going through there. Sandhill cranes, maybe? But didn't they usually hang out in cornfields? Roberts was sitting on the tailgate of a Chevy pickup truck, smoking a brown cigarillo down to the end. He was a tall, thin man with ragged hair and bright blue eyes, dressed quite a bit like Virgil, in jeans and barn coat. He was wearing brown cowboy boots and stood with the boots crossed at the ankle. He said, "Well, you look like flowers, from what Davenport told me." "I am," Virgil said. "We wouldn't have called you up if it weren't pretty important. If it's about these people going around shooting everybody, I don't know much. I know Jimmy Sharp, but I never met either of the other 2, as far as I know." "I'm not so concerned about Jimmy, unless you know where he is," Virgil said. "If I knew that, I'd call somebody up. That boy is nuts," Robert said.